Hey everyone, I'm going to be talking about Elder Scrolls 6 in this video and the most likely province that will be the setting to Elder Scrolls 6. I've put them in 4 tiers. There is the top tier, second tier, third tier and bottom tier. I've tiered them based on their likelihood because there are some that I think that will be a very likely setting and have very similar likelihoods to each other, so I put them in the same tiers based on kind of the same premises. It's not going to be a detailed discussion video because if I was to discuss every single province in detail and reasons why and why not they would be good provinces, I would be here all day. This video would be way over an hour long probably, so I'm going to keep it short and just talk vaguely about all of the provinces. Orsinium is not included. I know it's the Orc city, but it's not really a province, and if it was ever to be included in an Elder Scrolls main title, it would probably be a DLC or just a part of like High Rock or something. Okay, so for the bottom tier, the least likely province that Elder Scrolls 6 will be set in is definitely Skyrim. Of course, the most obvious reason that being is it's literally just been in the most recent main title in the game, so it's almost 100% certain that Skyrim will not be included as the main setting for Elder Scrolls 6. The only possible way I think Skyrim would ever be included in the next Elder Scrolls game, or even the next 2 or 3 Elder Scrolls games, is perhaps through DLC. The way they did with Solstheim, how that was a reference back to Morrowind for fans of Morrowind, so maybe in a future Elder Scrolls game they would include a small DLC, maybe a little snippet of Skyrim or something like that. Maybe just for the fans of Skyrim for a bit of nostalgia. A few other reasons besides the obvious one, which I already just explained, is it's a human province, and the last 2 Elder Scrolls games have been set in human provinces. Everything's been really familiar looking. Generally the whole setting of Skyrim are things you can find in real life, obviously not dragons and stuff like that and magic, but generally a lot of things in Skyrim are things that exist or have existed in the real world, so it's more familiar to us. And I think one of the appeals of Morrowind was the unfamiliar alien-like feel it had to it, but I'll discuss Morrowind later. Going on the fact that it's a human province, obviously the last 2 games have just featured human provinces, and I feel like Bethesda needs to either go to an elven province again like Morrowind, or maybe just go to a beast province as well, but I'll talk about that later. The next least likely one in the bottom tier, I feel this is slightly more likely but still pretty much impossible like Skyrim, is Cyrodiil. Cyrodiil was the setting of Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, and obviously it's been way too recent, and you know, the chances are they'll feature new unexplored provinces first before possibly returning to older provinces in the future. They have all this lore set up for all these different provinces that we haven't explored in a main Elder Scrolls game yet, and I feel like it'd just be ridiculous to return to an old one. Likewise with Skyrim, if they were ever to feature any aspect of Cyrodiil, it would be like the Solstheim DLC. Same reasonings as Skyrim. It's a human province, and the last 2 games have been human provinces, and most of it's really familiar. While one thing I liked about Cyrodiil was the fact that there was variety, because it's a central province of Tamriel, so you know, you had the swamps of Blackwood, and then you had the trees like Balaam Wood near Skingrad and Kvatch, and I just thought that was really cool, but at the same time we've already seen all that before, and it wasn't like to the extreme that the other provinces are. It was just a little taster to other provinces of a little bit of what it was like. The only most extreme example I can give is the fact that around Bruma it is basically Skyrim. Like in the Geralt Mountains it's really snowy, it's basically Skyrim. But obviously we've already explored Skyrim. Most of the setting, including the cities and the designs, are really real world inspired and not quite alien and new to us. Another reason why I think Cyrodiil will be a bad option is in the last few Elder Scrolls games we've had a bit of enough of the Empire. You know, if you think about Morrowind, even though it's the Dark Elf province, Morrowind featured quite a lot from the Empire, like a lot of relations to the Empire, and Cyrodiil was set in the hub of the Empire with the Imperial City and everything, so that was like very Empire related. And Skyrim obviously had the really distinct conflict between the Imperials and the Stormcloaks, so there's quite a lot of Empire featured in that, and I feel like other political positions need to be explored more. Like The only thing Skyrim really did was throw in a bit of Thalmor and the Stormcloak Rebellion, but there was still a lot of Imperial influence in that game. The third one in the bottom tier, and out of all the bottom tier provinces, this is the most likely, but it's still very unlikely, is Morrowind. Now, if there's one thing I can note about Morrowind, and not a lot of people know this unless you played Morrowind before or you know a bit about Morrowind anyway, is it's only set in Vardenfell, which is the island in which Red Mountain is situated. So there's actually a big chunk of Morrowind that is not included, and I feel like that could be possibly a DLC for like a Black Marsh setting or something like that. The only reason why I put Morrowind higher than Cyrodiil and Skyrim is because it has not been entirely featured, but because it has been the main setting of Elder Scrolls game as of previous, I feel like it's still very unlikely that it'll be featured in the next Elder Scrolls installment. Okay, so moving on to the third tier now, which is games that are not unlikely, but not the most likely. The first one of the two provinces in this tier is the least likely, is High Rock. Two reasons. The fact that Daggerfall featured High Rock already, so even though it's not what we include as like the sort of three-dimensional Elder Scrolls games that like Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim, but it was still featured as a province in a main title Elder Scrolls game. And another thing is, it's very familiar. I feel like a lot of what could be included in High Rock would be very similar to stuff we've seen in Cyrodiil and Skyrim, you know, very familiar to people. So I feel like Bethesda could go back to its alien roots a little bit, like with Morrowind, because the last two games have been sort of more human familiar provinces, and I would like to see something like all magical and very different from what we've seen in the past two installments. Another reason why High Rock may not be a good idea is also the fact that it's a human province, so I feel like we need to either bring back some elves or go to a beast province for Elder Scrolls 6. The main reason why I've ranked it higher than the bottom tier provinces is because even though it was featured in a main Elder Scrolls game, it's not in one of the more modern Elder Scrolls games, because Daggerfall we're talking was a 2D like 90s game, but obviously Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim were being like 3D like games that we're more familiar with nowadays, so I feel like that's one reason why High Rock could still be a possibility. The next game is, which I think is a little bit more likely than High Rock, is Hammerfell. Same as High Rock, I feel like one of the main reasons why it might not be used is because of Daggerfall again, because Daggerfall is actually set in two provinces, which is High Rock and Hammerfell, and I feel like that could be a reason why Bethesda may not choose that province. Based on the lore, it's not a super varied province relative to other provinces like Black Marsh and Elsewhere and Sunset Isle, etc. The main kind of features of the province is desert, and I feel like a few reasons why it might be a good idea is because obviously we've never really seen a desert province before. We've had a snowy province, we've had kind of a tame province like Cyrodiil, and then we've had Morrowind, which is really different and alien and not really specific, like volcanic I suppose. But one of the other main reasons why I don't think it will be included is it's a human province, and as I've said twice now, I feel like Bethesda should go for a elven or beast province instead to spice it up a little bit. Okay, we're moving on to the second tier now. We've only got one province in the second tier, and that is Somerset Isle, which is where I'm playing now in ESO. The main key points of why Somerset Isle is a very good province for Elder Scrolls 6 is because it's elven and it's steeped in lore and magic and mystery, and I feel like exploring the Somerset Isle and the enigma that is the Somerset Isle is really interesting. One thing I find interesting about Somerset Isle is it's quite an alien province, but it's not at the same time. There's still many things in the Somerset Isle that are quite familiar to us, but at the same time it's also very different. When exploring around in ESO like I am now, it looks very Japanese, like you know, the trees and stuff like that. I'm not like a big Japanese geography nerd or anything like that, but I am aware that these type of trees are quite common in places like Japan and stuff like that. It's alien and it's not, it's quite interesting, and you can tell it's steeped in magic, it's very colourful, it's really different, and obviously we have the Ultima architecture, which is going to be very different, and there will be return to Ayleid ruins, and I found Ayleid ruins a bit boring in Oblivion sometimes, because once you've seen one, you've seen them all. But I feel like with the new updated graphics and the better resources that Bethesda has, I feel like the Iliad runes could be made way more interesting, and maybe more lore about the Iliads discussed, because obviously Somerset Isle is an elven province, and the Iliads are quite related to the High Elves because they all came from the Aldmer, and I feel like it would be interesting to explore more about the Iliads. The Iliads are quite an enigmatic race, and as players I feel like exploring more about the Iliads will be really interesting. Now we're on to the top tier, and if you haven't guessed it already, there is 3 provinces in the top tier. The lowest I've put in the top tier, but still very likely, of course, that's why I put them in the top tier, is Black Marsh. Now a lot of people are going to be bothered by the fact that it's the lowest in the top tier, because Black Marsh is quite favoured by a number of people, because Argonians are quite a fan favourite amongst some. The main reason why it's not higher in the top tier is because its setting is maybe a little too alien for those who are kind of new to the world of Elder Scrolls. So I feel like, especially now there's more casual gamers around, and you know, Bethesda with Skyrim and Oblivion especially have been trying to open up the games to fit a wider audience. I feel like Black Marsh wouldn't provide much in the way of that, but the good things about it are the fact that it's an alien province and it'll be something very different. It's a beast province, which we've never been to a beast province before in the main Elder Scrolls games, and it's got very interesting lore. The Argonians are a very unique race. All the races are unique, of course, but the Argonians have this connection to these trees in Black Marsh called the Hist. And they're not like any ordinary trees, you know, they can communicate with the Argonians. Argonians are like basically born in Hist or something like that. These Argonians have a really strong connection with the history. So I feel like exploring the whole idea of the histories would be really interesting, especially for those who favour the Argonian race or are very interested in Argonian and Black Marsh lore. The second in the top tier is Elsewhere. The reason I haven't put it at the top is simply due to variation. While Elsewhere can provide some way of variation, I feel like a lot of the province is quite a deserty province, but there is more to it. It's not like Hammerfell, it's a bit more varied than that, and that's the only reason why it's not number 1. Khajiit are a massive fan favourite, and if you ask a Elder Scrolls fan what their favourite race is, you can put your money down that they might say Khajiit. It's a beast race therefore, and we'll be exploring an entire new race, an entire new type of race, and the Khajiiti lore is really interesting. The religion is based on the moons, which they call Joan and Jode, which is Massa and Secunda, and the moons are really important to the Khajiit because it determines what type of Khajiit they are born as, and therefore it'll provide more of an insight to all these interesting species of Khajiit that exist, because the only species of Khajiit we see in Skyrim are like 2 of like, I can't remember the exact number, but it's like 12, 16, something like that. So there is a lot of types of Khajiit, which I'm going to leave a link to a post I made on my lore account on Instagram about these Khajiiti races, which I can't remember them all now because I made that post so long ago. If anyone is interested, I'll leave a link to that in the description. A few other interesting aspects of Elsewhere is, 1, the fact that it is a province governed by the Aldmeri Dominion, and I feel like it would be interesting to focus on the Dominion rather than the Empire now and other political interests we've seen in the Elder Scrolls universe. I feel like more of an insight into the Aldmeri Dominion would be quite interesting, and Elsewhere is quite an interesting province for this because it has been a province that has been in and out of the Aldmeri Dominion for a very long time. And of course we have the fan favourite ingredient, I suppose, moon sugar, and we have skooma. You know, Khajiit are very indulgent in moon sugar and skooma. The final and top province that I think will be the most likely province in Elder Scrolls 6 is Valenwood. The main reason for this is because it's quite a different reason, if you don't already know about this. There was a Valenwood being the province of Elder Scrolls 6. I'll leave a link in the description to perhaps a video or an article about that. It's really interesting to look into that. I might make a video about it myself sometime. In a nutshell, it's basically Bethesda often codename their games so they can talk about it without directly referencing the game. And on a document by Bethesda, there was something that they couldn't talk about in, I think it was 2015 or 2014. They couldn't talk about something called Project Greenheart, and if you didn't already know, Greenheart is a place in Valenwood, and Bethesda's codenames for the games are always linked to things related to that game. So for example, Fallout 4's codename was the Institute. Other reasons for why I think Valenwood is a likely province besides the League, it's a very varied place. It is primarily a forested place, but there's all sorts of different types of woodland, and there's really interesting lore to the place as well. There is a moving tree in Valenwood called Valinesti, and there's so much magical fantasy lore, like the Wilder King, and there's the Cameron Dynasty and stuff like that. There's tons of really interesting lore, and I really would like to see Bethesda expand on the lore of Valenwood because it's quite unique to its province. And if you didn't already know, there is some Wood Elves who are cannibals, which is a bit new. Valenwood, while the Bosmer aren't a race steeped in magic, there is quite a lot of magic to it. A lot of the trees can be somewhat sentient, and there's a lot of magic surrounding the forest and the trees and the gods that are associated with the Bosmer and Valenwood. So it'd be interesting to go to kind of a unique, more magically steeped province. As well as that, it's speculated that Bosmer actually communicate with trees, therefore the trees will become towns for them, become houses for them, essentially. As well as this, I think it's a good place for the political setting in Tamriel at the moment, because it's in between the main hub of the Aldmeri Dominion and the main hub of the Empire, which Cyrodiil is just northeast of Valenwood, which is, as we know, is the main province of the Empire, and Somerset Isle is just to the west, and Valenwood is in the Aldmeri Dominion, but there is a lot of dispute within Valenwood. Some Bosmer adhere to it, some don't. There's also the interesting aspect of the Green Pact, which is basically made with the god Ifria, in which Bosmer cannot harm the trees and the plant life of Valenwood, and they must only eat animals, which is part of the reason why Bosmer are renowned hunters and archers, which is quite interesting. So that concludes my video on the least to most likely provinces that will be the setting of Elder Scrolls 6. Thank you for watching. I do apologise, the audio hasn't been fantastic in this video, and that is due to the fact that I usually use a different device, but that device is currently not working, so I'm using my PlayStation mic while playing Elder Scrolls Online at the same time, which hasn't been easy to talk while playing a game at the same time. You probably noticed me fumbling around a lot in the game because I'm talking, but thank you very much for watching. Feel free to leave comments whether you agree, disagree, what province you'd like to see in Elder Scrolls 6, or what provinces you really would not like to see in Elder Scrolls 6, and hopefully I should have a new video up soon. I don't have a schedule, so I'll just say soon to save my back. Bye!